Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Ivanka Trump, advisor to the president, and Matthew Swift.
Every time I hear him say my name, I don't see no one.
Hi, everyone.
Have a seat, please.
Wow, this room is rocking for 9 o'clock in the morning. Amazing.
Well, thank you so much for coming back. It's great to see you.
It's great to be here.
If you'll give me just a moment, I do want to say one thing. I was in Dallas on Thursday because a man who I really respected, was a great friend and a mentor to mine, T. Boone Pickens, passed away.
Yeah.
And he came and spoke on this stage a number of times. I know that he was friends with your brother. Anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge that he was a great man and a great American. So,
Absolutely.
we're back in New York. It's the UN, heads of state coming from all around the world. It's a chaotic week. There's a lot of traffic. People are coming for the UN. They're coming for Concordia. But we're here to talk about women and WGDP. What does WGDP stand for? And then the second is talk about your overall goal. What are you trying to do?
Well, thank you, Matt. And for everyone in this room, on behalf of the United States government, I apologize to all visitors and New Yorkers for the traffic. I remember as a former resident of this city, kind of dreading UN week.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a great thing for the city, and it's a great thing for leaders, NGOs, and executives, such as many in this room, who want to be part of delivering solutions to come together and to collaborate towards shared goals and really advance the ball. WGDP stands for the Women's Global Development and Prosperity Initiative, and we launched it this past year with the thought process that while there was a great amount of work being done in the United States government towards the goal of empowering women in the developing world, it had never been organized in a cohesive, structured way that enabled us to rigorously track the execution and the efficacy of the money that we were spending. So we said, you know what, let's take a holistic approach, the first ever all of government approach to unleashing what is inarguably the most underutilized resource in the developing world, the power, the potential, the grit, and the genius of the world's women. So WGDP, thank you. I love that so many of the men also agree with that statement. Thank you, very important. But it was very important to us, and you know, everyone talks about women's economic empowerment, and you know, there's sort of a consensus around this idea. Yes, of course, it's if you're not utilizing to the fullest extent of their potential 50% of a country's population, how can you achieve your goals from an economic perspective? Obviously, there's a social justice component. Of course, right? That's a given. But more recently, we've tried to focus the dialogue on a third element of this, which is a national security imperative, which gets people to listen who hadn't been listening before. So I went to the Munich Security Conference and I talked about this issue when the president rolled out WGDP. He did it as a national security presidential memorandum, of which there have only been 16 at that point in time. So we want to focus not only on the social justice elements and the economic elements, but also the role of women in ensuring peace and stability. This president was the first to sign into law legislation codifying the UN resolution that started 25 years ago that talks about women's role in peace and security, women, peace, and security. So we're the first country in the world.
But put that in context. What does that mean? So
it means that, well, just look at the data, and now we have a lot of it. When women are involved in conflict, mediation, and negotiations, the resulting peace lasts much longer, which makes sense. They represent 50% of the society. If they're not at the table and their voices aren't being heard, their concerns aren't being heard. When you look at the countries who rank the lowest on the index for gender discrimination, that rank the lowest, of them, and of the 17 that rank the lowest, 14 of that 17 has been involved in armed conflict in the last decade. So there is an extremely high correlation between countries that discriminate against women and countries being embroiled in conflict, either civil war or intra-country conflict. So there is a very strong national security hook here. But the purpose of WGDP is to uplift 50 million women by 2025 through 3 pillars. The first pillar is women in the workforce. So this is vocational education, it's job training. Really importantly, as I've seen in all of my travels, it's also helping women doing work that in some cases they've been doing for hundreds of years in their towns and communities, enhance their productivity by leveraging technology and better practices for productivity. So that's the first pillar. The second pillar involves entrepreneurship and helping women who there is a clear and well-documented delta between the amount of credit available to men and to women. So bridging that credit gap and helping women get access to loans at interest rates that are viable in these countries. So whether it's WeFi that this administration started with the World Bank and launched early in the administration's tenure, or 2X, we just announced that we surpassed our goal of $500 million catalyzed in Central and South America, which we announced last year, and we now have $1 billion to fund women entrepreneurs just in South America through WGDP's 2X initiative. We're trying to ensure that women entrepreneurs have the capital, have the networks, trading networks, have the mentorship that they need to thrive. And in continents with such tremendous potential and such challenges, like you look at the African continent, over 50% of the entrepreneurs in Africa, the new entrepreneurs, are women. So how do we encourage that? How do we fuel that? And then I'll just jump to the last pillar, which I actually think for pillars 1 and 2, enabling women to thrive in the workforce and enabling them to succeed as entrepreneurs. For that to be sustainable over the long term, I think pillar 3 is the most critical, which is changing the laws that prohibit women's full and free economic participation. So most people don't realize that in 75 countries around the world, there's at least one law discriminating against women's right to own property, inherit property, manage a business. There are 2.7 billion women in 104 countries who are precluded from working in the same industries as men because the work's deemed hazardous, it's deemed inappropriate, oftentimes preventing them from providing from their families in industries that sometimes are the drivers in those economies. So these are the laws that we have to get at and leverage the full weight of United States diplomacy, because at the end of the day, I think if we look at development assistance, the goal is self-reliance. The goal is for it not to need to exist anymore, for countries to rise and become trading partners. And I think the most effective way to deliver on that goal is to empower women in those communities.
Building on pillar 3, because this is important.
Yeah.
Take us to Ivory Coast. What happened?
So the Côte d'Ivoire government had tried for several years prior to pass a law around property rights for women to enhance the equality. And it was very much thwarted. There was a very poor reception. So we had been working with them in the years in between with MCC in coordination with us and WGDP to create a climate, and everything has to be done on a local level. Here we have some international visitors joining us that are part of the inaugural class of WGDP's Pillar 3 through the State Department, who are traveling around America and going to go back to their countries and help deliver local solutions.
By the way, they're all sitting right there.
Yes! Hi, ladies! we met at the beginning of the tour in Washington, so hello.
And this is the last day of the tour, correct?
Yes, and this is the last day of the tour. But all of the solutions have to be grounded in local perspective and inside. So we worked with many NGOs to change the law, and we're successful in that regard. So now in Côte d'Ivoire, women can inherit property, which they were precluded from doing. Women can manage businesses. When you looked at their economy, their largest export to the United States was cacao. Within the cacao industry, and I met these amazing women who had formed this village and savings and loan, which we fuel and added and announced a deliverable resulting to its expansion while we were there. But unbelievable women, and they comprised roughly 80% of the workers in the cacao business. But they were often not there at the point of sale, and because cacao is obviously agricultural, in order to be able to start a business and grow a business, you have to be able to have property rights. So in Cote d'Ivoire, unlike much of the rest of Africa, which still has a very low rate of property ownership for women, the continent-wide average is around 15%. In Cote d'Ivoire, it was 7%.
Wow.
So this has the ability to truly be transformative. So if you can't own your property, well, then you have no collateral, you can't get a loan from a bank to start and grow a business, and you can't scale. So this is a big deal, and it was a pleasure to work with the Cote d'Ivoire government. They were really amazing, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate. But we're seeing this across the globe, and I do think there is a misperception about how many laws are in place. In some cases, it's cultural. The laws are okay on the books, but when you leave the urban centers, there's no implementation of those laws, and people are unaware of their rights. But we decided through WGDP, this third pillar, to focus specifically on 5 laws, because if you try and do too much, you end up doing nothing. And so what were the 5 things that were so fundamental to women being able to achieve their economic potential and level the playing field? The ability to travel freely. This means accessing a passport, travel documents, of course driving, the ability to own, inherit, and manage property, the ability to work in the same industries as men, the ability to access institutions, courts of law, for example, and lastly, the ability to secure credit on equal terms as male counterparts. So these 5 laws, we're leveraging our collective efforts through this initiative to change in countries where there is not a level playing field.
You recently went to Latin America, and there is a delegation here from Paraguay. There is a delegation here from Argentina. I think there is a very large delegation here from Colombia because their president is speaking later today. I watched online this fascinating sort of moment that you had with this woman in Paraguay, I think it was, where you were dancing with her, and you seemed to have sort of this effect on her. Take this to a human level, right? We're talking policy at 50,000 feet. We even brought it down a little bit to talk about what happened in Cote d'Ivoire, which is an incredible advancement. Take it more to sort of a human level for everybody, I think, because I think it seemed like in that instance and in other instances, you are having a fascinating effect on people that you meet. So what are you seeing? Are you seeing a lot of hardship? Are you seeing a lot of potential? Are you seeing, and from your position, how do you impact them? How does that connect?
Well, I would say that they impact me probably far more than I impact them. There is nothing more inspiring. You meet these women, and whether it's Argentina and accessing very small credit dollars, whether it's in Africa through these Village Savings and Loans Association in Paraguay, some of these artisanal crafts makers, and their grit and their perseverance and their ambition rivals anyone in this room, myself included, 10 times over. Because to work as hard as they work, to make incremental progress, to work the hours they work while providing for their family, investing every cent they have and many that they don't, back into their families, their communities, their business, it is remarkable. And it inspires us all. Obviously, I always talk about how critical it is to be informed by local perspectives. You have to get out there. You have to see, you have to talk to people. You have to listen from them. But I think to our team, and WGDP is 10 US government agencies that have come together with this central goal. For the teams to see these women and realize the unbelievable potential if given the slightest opportunity. So I met with, when I was in Argentina, this unbelievable baker And she was crying, I was crying, everyone was crying. She was telling her story, and through a WG program with USAID, she was able to secure a small amount of assistance to buy baking equipment. And we're talking really basic stuff, a mixer, a couple of, I'm now exposing the fact I'm clearly not a baker, stuff for the kitchen, and ingredients.
Yeah.
And she set up her shop in her home. And what it meant that she was able to do this and bake. She said that baking she had 8 brothers and sisters, and it was through baking and just selling on the streets little things she had baked at home that she enabled them to go through high school. And now to be able to bake out of her home and create this shop in her community, and hearing her story and the transition from selling pastries on the street, selling eggs. At one point she had 1 chicken and she'd go out and sell the eggs to having this small business with dreams of scaling it into a storefront is just so beautiful. So it's deeply inspiring to me. I hope that on these visits I also generate goodwill for the United States that supports these programs. But really the effect is on all of us who work hard every day because we believe in this mission.
I feel like everybody asks you about your dad, but I was watching an old interview, and I have to say I didn't know very much about your mother. But sort of this take no prisoners, frankly, very tough woman who in different interviews sort of, very, very strong. Is that one of the reasons you're doing this program, is your mom?
So my mom grew up in communist Czech Republic, which means as a child I got away with nothing. So she is definitely tough, definitely take no prisoners. She's also really funny. She makes my father look politically correct. So it's fascinating. All my friends would love to hear what my mom had to say on every topic. But she was and is an unbelievable role model for me. So as a little girl, we're sitting here in the Grand Hyatt Hotel, which I just heard is about to undergo a renovation. In the late 70s, just after giving birth to my older brother, Don, my mom was here on this construction site, walking lightly in stiletto heels, because she always said that there's nothing she can't do better in heels, or better in flats than she could in heels. And really helping oversee the execution of the construction of this very building. So she is a force. She is a force. She believes in hard work, no cutting corners. She's really funny, like really funny.
Sounds like all the success was her.
It was a good part. Yeah, I'm so grateful for her.
So let's go back. So going from a business to government, and I think one of the questions, this was very interesting, I was down in Washington for this conversation with this group that you have who've been on this 2-week tour of the United States, and they're here for the Concordia Summit, and they're here to talk to you. One of the things that one of the participants raised, and I actually really appreciated how blunt the question was, which was saying, we have these conversations now, we have them here, but then everybody leaves, and then we call the embassy, and it's hard to get an answer, and it's hard to get a response, and how do we get connected? And we get lost in the behemoth that is the United States federal government and our presence. And I can say, and as someone who has so much respect for our foreign service officers in the State Department, when we host international summits, it's complicated, and it's not the easiest structure to work in when you're on the outside. Yeah. So what are you doing to ensure that not only is this program practically implemented locally where results are found, but also that it's here to stay rather than something that could be completely called off because of an election, completely changed? So first is, what is your advice to people who want to benefit from this, get that loan, get this kind of support, be able to come to our embassy and our representatives to talk about the laws that they need to change so that they have opportunity in their country? That's number one. And number two is this just a thing that's here to stay with one administration, or are we going to see this grow? Are we going to see it happen after, regardless of what happens in an election?
Well, so thank you for the question, and it is really important. So when you are the CEO of a business, you define the mission, and then you ensure people are executing on the mission. When you are in government, you need to coalition build and ensure that there is agreement in terms of the parameters, that all the stakeholders, whether they be legislative on both sides of the aisle, or administrative or NGO, is excited about the mission and the goal. So we spent almost 2 years meeting with Democrats, Republicans, thought leaders, anyone in the ecosystem of people who would be prioritizing or could be championing these issues to get their advice and perspective. And WGDP wasn't something we just decided. You know, the 3 pillars, how the metrics we're attaching to their success, and rigorous metrics are so important because for something to sustain itself, you have to show that it works and you have to show the impact. We owe that to the American taxpayer. We owe them the fact that this is a smart, well-designed, rigorously implemented program that achieves the end goal of all development assistance, which is that you're helping people transition away from it. So I think a lot of the work that we did in the early days, just really spending time with people who were incredibly knowledgeable and hearing their input and ensuring that WGDP was designed with their input in mind, will bear fruit in that regard, because all of these stakeholders feel a sense of ownership of this at our agencies, but also outside of the U.S. government, and I think that is very important.
Well, I want to say this in closing. You know, this is a challenging time in the world. It's a complicated time in the world. I've met Democrats that are doing incredible things, like Michael Blake, who we just heard from. I've met Republicans that are doing incredible things, and I've also met Democrats and Republicans that aren't doing such good things. But I want to say this. You and I have gotten to know each other over the last year and a half. From a substantive perspective, from an implementation perspective, from a practicality perspective, and I am not just saying this, I think this program is really good. I think it's strong. I think it has a lot of potential. I hope that it stays. I hope that it is not something that gets either lost by the bureaucracy or gets lost by an election. And as I said, I've talked to Democrats and Republicans, and when we talk about things like the BUILD Act, a bipartisan act that came, something that President Trump and Nancy and Speaker Pelosi were on the same page about, that is not talked about enough, by the way, and we have to be clear. After your trip, we talked to a lot of our friends in Colombia. We talked to the Paraguayan delegation that's here today, and we said, well, what was that like? What was your encounters like? Well, how did it go? And they were like, it was great. It was amazing. It was, there's opportunity here. There's something, so.
Oh, absolutely, and it's all collaboration. So in Colombia, President Duque, you mentioned, will be speaking this afternoon. He agreed during our visit to, number one, sign the Colombian equivalent of an executive order, ensuring equal access to credit for women in Colombia. Big deal. Number two, they launched a partnership in conjunction with us, and State was represented as well as Lisa Hirschman from DOD to be a partner country with us in developing a strategy for Colombia on women, peace, and security, just like we have in the United States. So we can ensure to integrate women into the conversation around conflict resolution, peace, and stability. Two very big deals. Plus, which I think is particularly relevant for this audience, we launched a major private sector deliverable. So one of the things about WGDP and our Pledge to America's Workers, and my co-chair of that, Wilbur Ross, is here, and Barbara from Siemens, who you'll be blown away. I mean, talk about leveraging the private sector to achieve a shared goal around workforce development and job training. We've had over 350 companies in under a year since I was last here commit to skilling and retraining 14 million American workers. 14 million. And that's incredibly difficult. It's really hard to take a mid to late career worker who is likely to be automated out of their job and equip them with the skills necessary to fill a company's job vacancy. And that doesn't count as a new job
Yeah.
if you reskill someone into a vacant position.
Yeah.
So we're so excited about the work of that advisory board and that council, but with WGDP as well, the vast majority of the money for implementing these programs is coming from the private sector.
Yeah.
And we love that. We want to leverage that. We want to do more because at the end of the day, we can't go it alone. If we go into a country and we say, oh, we're going to do all of this job training, but there's no private sector employers who are interested in investing in creating the jobs that we're skilling people for, then it will be a failure. So how do we go hand in hand? How do we choose countries? How do we implement programs with the private sector? So we've been very fortunate. So anyone out here who wants to get involved in WGDP or our Pledge to America's Workers, we very much welcome the commitment to joining us in
And your team is
advancing
hosting
these
a
goals.
roundtable after this, or later today, actually, on that program and how people
Yeah.
can get involved. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Matt.
It was really good to see you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great to see you.